Hello, and welcome to Pete's Behavioural Insights and Theories, aka Pete's Bits. In this first video on the channel, we're going to try and explain behavioural economics. So if you're excited for this video to start and you're interested in this field, please can you hit that subscribe button down below and leave this video a thumbs up. Alright, let's get started. So behavioural economics is basically the love child between economics and psychology, as well as a bunch of other disciplines that have managed to work their way in there. Behavioural economics asks a lot of the same questions as traditional economics, such as why do we value the things that we value? Why do we buy the things that we buy? And why do we make the decisions that we make? The key difference between behavioural economics and traditional economics is the starting point, and it's the assumptions that we make about human behaviour. Traditional economists will try and tell you that humans behave in a way that is perfectly rational, selfish, and utility maximizing. This means that for every single decision that humans make, no matter how big or small, we always take the time to perfectly weigh up the pros and cons of every decision. We're selfish, meaning that we never act in a way that benefits other people at the expense of ourselves. And we're utility maximizing, meaning that we always act in a way that is beneficial for our self-interest and we never do anything that could potentially harm ourselves. Now, you watching this video, you're a human, I assume. So ask yourself, does this description of humans sound like you? No, of course not, right? Humans act irrationally all the time, and to make these assumptions is a fool's game. So behavioral economists can define rationality only in one way, but irrationality can be demonstrated in a whole host of ways, and I'm going to be showing you a few of those ways right now. Perhaps the easiest and most primal example of how humans are irrational is if we can think about emotions. Traditional economists leave no room for emotions in their models of human behavior, but we know that in fact a lot of our decisions are governed emotionally and not by rational weighing up of pros and cons. Imagine you're an early human living 5,000 years ago. One day, you and your perfectly rational traditional economic friend, we'll call him Homo economicus, decide to go for a stroll in the jungle. Now, as you're walking through the trees, suddenly you see this huge, ferocious bear. It hears you approaching, swings its head around, and starts chasing you down. Now you, the real human, is stricken by fear. You see the bear, you turn around and you bolt and run for your life, and you manage to escape through the edge of the forest. But your friend, Homo economicus, he doesn't act on emotions, he acts on perfect rationality. So he decides to pull up his Excel spreadsheet, or I guess it's Stone Age time, so maybe he pulls up his stone tablet, and starts to write two columns, pros and cons. It starts to weigh up the pros and the cons of running away. Now, who do you think has the better chance of survival out of you and your friend Homo economicus? Of course it's you. This is what your friend looks like. But emotions aren't the only way in which our decisions are fallible. And to explain why, I want to give you another metaphor of irrationality. The metaphor I want to use is a visual illusion, because visual illusions provide a very powerful metaphor for how our brains are fallible. Take a look at this illusion. Look at the two tiles labeled A and B. Now, assuming that your visual systems are working correctly, all of you should be able to see that the tile labeled A is darker and B is lighter. However, I already told you that this is an optical illusion. So with a little bit of editing, I can demonstrate to you that in fact A and B are the same color, right? So now I've educated you. I've told you that A and B are the same color. But yet, when I take away these lines, it's like you haven't learned anything. Even though you know in your mind that A and B are now the same color, you can't help but be fooled by the illusion. So this applies to our decision making as well. Here our brain is being fooled in a repeatable, incorrect, and predictable way. Now this is your vision being fooled in a predictable way, and vision is one of the best things that our brains are equipped to do. It has the most amount of cerebral cortex dedicated to it. It's something which we do every single day, most of the day, and it's something which we have an evolutionary reason to be very good at, and yet we still make mistakes. So how many more mistakes do you think our minds make in realms where we don't have a very large amount of the brain dedicated to solving it, we don't have an evolutionary reason to be good at it, and we don't do it very often? Well, it turns out we make mistakes in those realms all the time. So let me give you a couple of examples. Here's a really famous example from 2003, a paper by Johnson and Goldstein. And in this paper, they looked at organ donation rates across Europe. Now you'll see that looking at this bar chart, there's basically two groups of countries. Those countries on the left who donate very little, and those countries on the right who donate a lot. Now, how come there's such a huge disparity between the two groups? How come there's not a smooth gradient in organ donation? Well, it turns out it's just to do with the form that people fill in regarding their organ donation. For those countries with very low donation, they have a box that reads something like this. Check the box if you want to donate your organs when you die. And in the countries with very high organ donation, they have a box that reads like this. Check the box if you do not want to donate your organs when you die. Now in both scenarios, people don't check the box, but in the first case, they're not donating their organs, and in the second case, they are. And as you can see, this simple change of wording, just one word difference, has a huge effect on the outcome of people's choices. And that's just one example of choice architecture. In this case, the idea being exploited here is that of defaults. Make organ donation the default, and significantly more people will follow through and adhere to it. Let me give you another example from health. Deaths from overdosing on painkillers is a real problem, and one which at its core is behavioural. The behaviour we're trying to change is people taking too many painkillers at once. So a long time ago, paracetamols used to be sold in little bottles like this. You probably haven't seen these for many years, but you probably have seen them in TV shows and movies. And that's because the government introduced legislation that meant that paracetamols had to be sold in what we call pimple packets, these packets which we're more familiar with today. Now the thinking behind this legislation was one that was purely psychological. When people are in a great deal of pain, they're not able to think clearly like Homo economicus is. Think about the bear in the forest. When you're under a lot of emotional stress, you tend to act on impulse. Now when paracetamols were sold in bottles like this and people are in a lot of pain, they would dump them into their hands, pop a bunch of them in their mouth, and swallow them whole. And this reckless taking of paracetamols is what led to a lot of people dying from overdoses, a truly avoidable and tragic death. The idea behind the pimple packet is that even if you're in a great deal of pain, it takes a lot of time, effort, and energy to get a lethal dose of paracetamol when you have to pop them out one by one. In psychology, we call this the friction cost. Now, friction in physics provides resistance to an object. And in psychophysics, friction provides resistance too, but this time it's providing resistance to a behavior. The pimple packet acts as resistance to people overdosing on paracetamol. And sure enough, in the 10 years following this legislation, deaths from overdosing on paracetamol were reduced by 43% in the UK. An enormous demonstration for the power of choice architecture and how understanding the psychology behind people's decisions can help them make better decisions and even save lives. But emotions, defaults, and friction costs are just 3 simple ideas in behavioral economics, when in fact there are so many more to explore. The endowment effect, the IKEA effect, reciprocity, scarcity, social proof, the list goes on and on and on, and it's a fascinating subject to explore. So, if you want to find out more about behavioral economics, consider subscribing to my channel, where I'll be exploring all of these in future videos. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.